Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Tobias. I'm the Associate Director of Exhibitions and Art Collections and the Associate Curator of Art here at Denver Botanic Gardens. And I'm going to tell you today about the strategies that we have been developing for planning content for unplannable circumstances and staying sane in the process. So a little bit about this presentation. This came about as a result of changes that COVID forced in our exhibition schedule. We were worried about fall shutdown as well as our summer and spring exhibition schedule obviously was thrown into quite a bit of flux. And so we were really trying to think about digital assets that would allow access to the gallery in case there was a shutdown, in case there was a partial closure, in case our schedules changed again for exhibitions. Our criteria was that they couldn't add a lot of cost to what we were already doing. Ideally, they wouldn't add any cost. They also couldn't add additional projects to anybody else's plate. As most of you are no doubt experiencing, we don't have a lot of latitude in terms of budget or staffing right now. They needed to be really lightweight. They needed to be usable on a number of platforms, so social, web, newsletter, the blog, YouTube, e-communications, whatever is needed, because of course, we don't know exactly what we're going to need these assets for, because we don't exactly know what the circumstances will be. So for example, if we stay open, we might use them for promotion. If we go into shutdown, they'll allow access to exhibitions. If we have reduced visitation, they'll allow broadened access for our visitors, as well as these are assets that we wanted for future use. So things like artist talks, demos, assets to approach funders and lenders, that sort of thing. So we've developed a framework to help identify some places where we could easily develop these assets for all sorts of different uses. I'm going to show you examples of these assets and how we've used them or could use them in the future. Our goal really is to create assets that can be available for a wide variety of uses, as I said, and in particular assets that don't take a lot of time to create, because without knowing what you'll need them for, you of course don't know if you're going to use them. And so we wanted to create assets within existing workflows where if we don't end up using them, it's really no harm, no foul. So part of the key here is to mine things that you're already doing. So for example, I chose this image here of installation. This is a site-specific sculpture called Leaf that we installed in the spring. A great example of the kind of opportunities you have to mine content from activities that you're already doing. You already have staffing on site for this, lots of interesting behind the scenes stuff going on, great opportunity to pull out some assets that you might be able to use for future purposes. And of course, installation is not the only thing that you're doing, obviously. Registration is also a great one. You're doing registration and condition documentation all the time, which produces all of these beautiful high resolution images. You're researching objects, you're writing about them for labels and interpretive purposes. You're checking in on the galleries all the time once the exhibition is installed. If you're an arts institution, you're constantly talking to artists about various exhibition logistics, or you're consulting with staff, and or I should say, you're working through gallery prep. All of these things you're already doing, and they all offer different opportunities to create these types of flexible assets. So before we started to get into this, I really wanted to think about what it is exactly that visitors are missing. Of course, as we all know, a museum is far more than just the space of what the museum is. And so we wanted to think through, really, if we aren't able to provide physical access to the space for whatever reason as a result of shutdown or restrictions to how much access we can provide, what exactly is it that they're missing in terms of visitor experience? So this is a brief analysis that we did. You'll probably observe it's tied broadly to John Falk's analysis of visitor motivations, and as well it's tied to some evaluation that we've done of our own visitors, for we know why they particularly value our institution. No doubt if you do your own sort of analysis like this, it will reveal those same things about your institution that are unique. And so really we wanted to think through, if we're not able to provide physical availability, what might visitors be missing out on? They're probably missing out on educational context or content rather. They're missing out on the recreational experience of museums and the emotional component of an exhibition. They're missing out on the interpretation or the interpersonal engagement, the aesthetic experience of an exhibition, the institutional engagement, which is something that's really more an institutional goal than a visitor goal, but it's important for them in times when they may not be able to visit to remember that you're there for them, that they have a relationship with you. Relaxation and escape, novelty and inspiration, all of these sorts of things could be missing if your visitors aren't able to visit you. And of course, this particular component is related to concerns about, for example, a shutdown that could be coming in the fall, could be coming in 2021, less related to the idea that these assets could be used for promotion. But of course, if your assets are sufficiently flexible, they can actually be used for both. So we have an idea of what we want to provide for our visitors in terms of the experiences that they'll miss out on from access. And we had a criteria for how we want to produce them, the kind of assets that we wanted. We wanted to create a kind of simple, lightweight plan for each exhibition that would really help guide this asset creation. And one of our key questions here is, how do you create content when you don't know how it'll be used? Our answer has been that you create a wide variety of content and a wide number of assets. So trying to create these assets quickly, easily, and create really this suite of context around a particular exhibition. That could be all sorts of things. It could be photos, time lapses, blogs, other text applications, videos, interviews, all of these things that create a holistic suite of assets that really can be mixed and matched as needed, depending on what happens. So this is a form that we created to help us identify some of the spots where we could easily create some of the assets that serve each exhibition. Obviously, not every exhibit will benefit from the same kind of assets, so this will kind of help guide in terms of thoughts about what might be juiciest for each exhibition. Part of the idea here is to take advantage of staffing that's already happening for these activities. So for example, again, going back to installation, you already have staff there. Your staff no doubt has smartphones. If you have the opportunity ahead of time to identify maybe a really juicy or interesting part of that exhibition installation, you can flag that with the team member who's on site to take a moment, take a video, a time lapse, photos, whatever that looks like, to create some targeted assets that you'll be able to use for future purposes. So I'm going to share with you a few of the assets that we've created for our fall exhibitions, things that were shifted as a result of COVID, as part of this strategy to create assets that will allow us to grant visitors additional access in case we have limited access shutdowns, whatever is coming up next. So I'm going to start off with gallery prep, which turned out to be the source of some surprisingly fun assets. Depending on the exhibit, there might be different juicy parts of the prep, behind the scenes stuff that visitors might enjoy. For this one, I decided to document painting an accent wall for From the Vault exhibition. It's an exhibition that features works and objects from our own collections. And it's something that we had thought might be paired with a final image of the exhibition. This is obviously a very rough cut, really more a proof of concept than anything else, but you can see how it could easily be improved. I estimated time commitment on this for 1 to 2 hours, which includes capturing it and some additional editing. This version obviously did not take me 1 to 2 hours, but if you spent a little bit of extra time to make it a little bit more polished, it certainly could. Just took this on my iPhone. Something that addresses the fun and entertainment side as well as some institutional engagement. So this one obviously focused a little bit more on fun, paired it with some yakety sax style music. And part of our goal here was that if we had our exhibition schedule shifted sufficiently that we needed some sort of additional assets as reminders of openings and that kind of thing, this could be an asset for that. You know, can always also certainly serve as B-roll and other videos, part of a curator talk, all kinds of fun things that an asset like this might be able to provide us. This is just an image of what the completed installation looks like. So again, just thinking through how you can create these very lightweight assets integrated into things that you're already doing that create the full 360 of an exhibition, really gives it context. Another great source, registration photos. Obviously, one result of registration photos, condition checking in particular, is all of these really great high-res images. Obviously, not all of them, even most of them, are necessarily usable. They're these very specific details that don't necessarily give visitors a lot of context. But there tend to be a handful that are these really luscious details. For example, here on the left, we have the brushstrokes of an oil painting, an Emmett Armstrong Irvin oil painting. On the right here, we have an encaustic by Melanie Walker. And so these are registration photos that we were taking for condition purposes anyway. We already have them, and they're these really gorgeous, detailed aesthetic images that if visitors aren't able to visit us, they're still going to be able to get a little bit of the feel of this exhibition in an aesthetic sense. Could be something you could easily pair with educational content. There's a little bit of that novelty and inspiration element to it. And something that's just super flexible. You could use this for all kinds of stuff, social, web, newsletter, whatever you need it for, and you already have these. Again, same deal with science photos. These are also from the vault. These are images of fungi that are in this exhibition. On the right here, we have a giant puffball fungi named Fred, who we've gotten a lot of mileage from on the web. But again, these are great assets to pair with educational content. You already have these. So, taking 10, 15 minutes to look through your condition photos. Maybe when your registrar is taking condition photos, ask them to take a few that seem like they have a little bit better context, maybe are a little bit juicier for visitors, and then take a minute, look through them, see if they need to be cropped, and you have some great assets already at your disposal. Another great product of registration is surprise objects facts. What I mean by surprise object facts is thinking about the kinds of things that you discover on an object when you spend a lot of time really close up with it. So for example, things like maybe you see a painting of flowers, and if you get really close, there's a little fly on the flowers. You wouldn't necessarily notice that if you're not spending a ton of time with it, or if you're not registering it. A signature that's covered in moss on a sculpture, something like this. I love this guy. This is another piece from the vault. This is an artist bracket fungi with the name of prominent mycologist listed on Verso. Super fun opportunity to, again, take one of these photos. You already have the photo, you have interpretation related to it because you're already doing the object research, and feature it wherever you need it for whatever purpose you need it. If it turns out that you're able to be open, this could be a super fun object highlight, something that goes on Instagram. If it turns out that you go into closure, there's some kind of temporary access problem, this is something that will give visitors a taste of the exhibition. Another great one that you're already doing, installation documentation through photos. Again, I said this one was 10 to 15 minutes. This was a photo I took on my iPhone. Really addresses the aesthetic experience, some of that institutional engagement if you're not able to be open. You're handling all of these interesting objects, you're moving stuff with equipment, tons of behind the scenes kind of access there. And we had really envisioned these as assets that could help remind visitors about our upcoming reopening, but certainly these could also be fantastic assets for things like virtual artist talks, curator talks. Really, it could just be part of assets that we can use for virtual programming going forward as well. Something we already have, took very little time aside from gathering the best ones. So here's another one, similar kind of idea. This is installation documentation, photos of the Pink Lemonade Hope exhibition featuring an artist named Coco Bayer here in Denver. And part of our goal for these was these informal assets specifically for these types of outlets so that we could be nimble with announcements related to opening and reopening. Our plans and schedules kept changing quite quickly, and so these were things that we wanted to kind of snap and have in our back pockets for when we needed. Super easy, again, estimated 10 to 15 minutes for cropping and sorting max. These are both from my phone. Of course, if you have a camera, you can definitely upgrade the quality. Another great one, installation documentation time-lapse. These are super fun. Obviously, not all installations lend themselves to time lapses, but many of them do. This particular one that I'm about to show you was actually filmed for us by the artist. I think she did a little bit of editing, so I'm estimating about 2 to 3 hours here. Great one for entertainment, institutional engagement. And this particular one is not set to sounds, but you can imagine it easily could be to give it a little bit of an emotional quality. This one is kept really short and informal. Something like this would be fantastic for social media, or as B-roll would also be awesome. It's, of course, a bit of a low quality export for this purpose. It's really just a really fun, entertaining asset that took essentially no effort to put together. Even more so with this one, this is a different installation that we did in the spring. It's a site-specific installation. Again, this is that sculpture leaf. This one I took myself. I'm estimating the time commitment is 1 to 2 hours. If you wanted to edit it, give it a little bit of music, that sort of thing. The version that I'm showing you here, of course, has had absolutely no editing. So it took me about 10 minutes. There were a couple different versions that I created of it to get a good angle, but something like this, even as a raw informal asset, has tons of different flexible uses to be able to give your visitors a little bit of a sense of what it is that you have on site, what it is that they'll be able to come visit once you reopen. A lot of different versions of outlets that you could use for something like this. Another great one, talking to artists. Another thing that if you work at arts institutions, you are no doubt doing all the time. You're already talking to artists if you work with living artists about shipping, registration, copy, all of these sorts of things. If you're working with curators, same thing, subject matter experts, all of these people you're already having conversations with. So we wanted to work with artists to create some assets that provided even a different avenue of access into these exhibitions, since we're already having these conversations. So we've started interviewing artists as kind of a standard part of our exhibition suite. This is Melanie Walker, who created an installation for us called Ghost Forest, and she was actually on site doing the installation for us. And so we felt that was a great opportunity to sit down with her, do an interview, and have a really beautiful asset. This one's a little bit different than the others. This one took about 15 to 20 hours of staff time, though what you'll see here is still a rough cut, so a little bit more editing yet to do, but you'll see that it's a pretty polished product. So this one is something that's a little bit more if you have some staff availability in terms of editing time. The interview itself took probably about half hour max, and really gets at some of these key ideas around institutional engagement, interpersonal engagement, and emotional experience. It's really evocative of the emotion of the exhibition. So for example, if we do go into shutdown again in the fall, we're still able to provide access to some of the qualities of this exhibition to visitors, as well as provide some exposure for the artists.
Okay, here goes.
Ready?
My installation, Ghost Forest, is an immersive experience designed to hopefully remind people of what's important in the world, plants that have created an atmosphere that allow us to survive. I think the 3 words that best describe my work are ephemeral, ethereal, and immersive. My father was a photographer, my mother was a seamstress, and I sort of took the sensibilities that I acquired from both of them and merged them together. Growing up in the art environment that I did, I remember when I was about 5 years old, coming home from school and telling my parents that I wanted to be a teacher because they got paid for what they did. And then my parents sat me down and explained to me that my father got paid for his photographic work that he did. And I guess I was always surprised when I found out that not everybody's father made pictures. Some of this work is historical photographic processes using the cyanotype process, which is a sun printing process using contact printing. And many of the pieces have been toned with laundry detergent and tannic acid. Others are transfers onto sheets of mica. So I'm really interested in how many different ways I can approach the photographic medium. Another reason that I work with transparent materials is that I was born legally blind in my left eye, and I see double all the time. I'm usually pretty good at shutting off what's going on in my left eye, but frequently when I fix on somebody to talk to them, I'll see a ghost on their left-hand side. So it's kind of this ethereal experience. I think Denver Botanical Gardens as a setting for art is a really interesting environment because it integrates human aesthetics with plant aesthetics. And maybe people have an unexpected art experience when they come here.
So that's a great asset for us for a variety of uses. It's obviously a little bit longer, but in case we aren't able to be open, we're going to be able to share some of the context of the exhibition. If we are able to be open, great documentation will, drive visitation, and as well, it can just be part of building a suite of assets that really helps us build our exhibition presence online. I also wanted to share a much faster way that we've done this. This was an artist interview that I did over the phone with an artist named Mike Whiting, though it wasn't recent. And this one we did just using a speakerphone and a recording app on my cell phone. Again, this was existing activity. I was talking to the artist about shipping and that sort of thing. So worked in 15 minutes for an interview. Downloaded the file, sent it to a transcription service. This one's a little bit cheating because I know that I said that part of our standard here was not to add any additional cost, but these transcription services for something of this length are often so cheap that it's kind of a nominal fee. So I wanted to include it here anyway, because all told, including time for the interview, time to download the file, do a little bit of editing, was probably only about 2 to 3 hours. And we have this really great, juicy interview in a text format that, again, is useful for all these different things. So we could use it for the newsletter, for the magazine, for e-communications, really whatever we need it to do. So it's part of this developed suite of images, context, emotional qualities, all these things around exhibitions that allow us to have assets for all these different purposes. Wanted to share here a form that we've developed for this purpose. So this is just a little cheat sheet we've put together of standard questions that we ask every artist. So this is what we call our 10 questions with. And it's really just questions that are broad enough that they create sort of this conversation around exhibitions that allow us to use it for a lot of different purposes. So for example, there's stuff in here that's really specific to the exhibition. There's stuff that's more broadly about their practices. There's stuff in there about their interest in Denver Botanic Gardens as a location. So the questions here as well are really designed to be quite broad so that we can use them for a variety of different purposes. Object research is another really great source of assets that we found. Of course, you're already doing all of this research to create assets, like labels, interpretive panels, these kind of things. And with just a little bit of tweaking, you can use those for other things. So for example, here we have some blog planning that we're doing out through 2020. Again, trying to think ahead in case there is a problem with being able to keep the galleries open. There will still be some of this access to some of this educational content. For example, we did a bunch of research on Margaret Mee already for this exhibition, same with Nikki Goulandras. And so we already have this content, we already have the high-res photos. So part of our strategy here has been thinking through what can we twist just a little bit and give it a bunch of new outlets that in case of whatever is coming up next might give us options. Those I estimated at 4 to 5 hours, again, thinking about taking that content, editing it into a little bit of a different format for the blog, whatever that entails. Here's a different way that we've also used this object research to provide access that has been even quicker. This is something, an image from the Temple of Flora that we shared on Instagram. Literally took 10 minutes. Again, this is content that we had for exhibition development purposes. We had the images for exhibition development purposes. And so it can be part of this suite of options that you have depending on what you need. This is something that we posted before the exhibitions team was actually able to open the galleries. So you can get a sense of different ways that we can provide educational content and aesthetic access within assets that we already have on hand. Daily walkthroughs are another really great one. You or somebody on your team is probably checking on the galleries all the time to make sure everything is in order. And so they're getting to see those spaces both with and without visitors. And so it's a great way to think about how to integrate really quick asset creation into that activity that should you go through some kind of shutdown, or perhaps there's reduced access as a result of a COVID spike, you're still going to be able to give visitors a taste of it. This is one that I created again for that Ghost Forest exhibition on a gallery walkthrough. I did one afternoon. I think this probably took me about 15 minutes all in, and that includes a couple of takes that didn't work all that well. Something I just shot on my iPhone. Of course, not a super polished product, but that's not necessarily problematic depending on the kind of experience that you're trying to provide your visitors. Of course, not all installations are going to lend themselves to this as nicely as this kind of experiential exhibition. But we've also done other things like just taking a walk through the galleries and highlighted a few of our favorite objects, kind of walked around sculptures, that sort of thing, to give visitors a sense of what that experience is like actually in the gallery. Again, something that we can provide in lieu of physical access, or something that's going to be really fantastic for artist talks, curator talks, whatever other types of outlets that we might need an asset like this for. So we've been doing this for all of our COVID era exhibitions, and we haven't worried too much about sorting out assets. So I just wanted to share with you what this looks like on the sort of administrative end. So really what we've been doing is essentially just creating a bucket of assets that we're providing access to for our marketing friends, that if they need something for whatever is coming down the pike, we're open, we're not open, scheduling has shifted, we're not really sure. They have this variety of assets that covers a variety of different aspects of the exhibition and of visitor experience that they can really just draw on and pull things out as they need. Likewise, we haven't worried too much about things like file naming, file conventions, that kind of thing, because we wanted it to be something that staff could easily contribute to. So you're the registrar, you have a beautiful photo of an Emma Armstrong Irvin detail, you can pop it in there. You happen to do a walkthrough of the gallery one afternoon and you caught some particularly beautiful light streaming on a piece, or whatever that looks like, you can pop that in there as well. So whatever it looks like for your team to capture these assets easily as they're going about their day, we really wanted them to be able to pop it into this particular location. And then it's just this suite of assets that provides context for exhibitions. So on a final note here, I also wanted to add that this is an approach that we plan on continuing to use in the future, even once things have become more stable and on-site operations are easier. It really helps us broaden our audience and to reach people who can't visit us on site regardless of COVID. So we really see this strategy being something that will continue over the long term and will continue to have a lot of long-term use. No doubt it will continue to evolve both through indoor and outdoor exhibitions, what that looks like, but really creating a suite of content here that's going to do us a lot of good for a lot of purposes, no doubt, that we don't even know what they are yet. So thank you so much for joining me to talk about digital assets in the age of uncertainty and COVID. Please feel free to reach out to me at this email address if you have questions, in addition to the live Q&A that will follow this presentation. Thanks so much.